The asteroid's jagged surface glimmered faintly in the dim starlight of the nebula. Commander Jacob Daniels adjusted his breathing, crouching behind a stack of rusted cargo crates in the derelict mining facility. His Navy SEAL instincts kept his movements silent as shadows. The Imperial patrol moved with practiced precision, their armor reflecting cold efficiency. Jacob's mission was clear: retrieve the stolen data crystal and disappear. The stolen intelligence, details of an imminent Empire offensive, could save Earth from destruction. Humanity's survival was his burden. Sector 3 clear, crackled a voice over the patrol's comms. Jacob tapped his wrist communicator, quickly accessing the patrol patterns. Just as he predicted, a gap in their formation appeared. Timing was everything. He darted forward, hugging the wall until he reached a control panel. The crystal should have been there, stored for transport. It wasn't. A sudden metallic clang echoed. Jacob's fingers instinctively brushed his sidearm. Before he could react, a magnetic pulse blasted through the facility. His body seized, muscles locking as the shockwave hit. Dropping to his knees, he gritted his teeth, cursing himself for underestimating the Empire's reach. "Target acquired," said a guttural voice behind him. Heavy footsteps closed in. Jacob could barely turn his head as the towering figure of a Vraxian enforcer stepped into view. The alien's translucent green skin shimmered under its armored exosuit. Its 4 eyes narrowed. "Pathetic," it sneered. "Humans always think they're clever. Better than being oversized jellyfish." Jacob shot back, his voice strained but laced with defiance. The enforcer's fist collided with Jacob's jaw. Darkness swept over him. Jacob awoke to the sound of humming machinery, and the sharp bite of restraints on his wrists. The room was stark, lit by a sterile, pulsing blue glow. He was strapped to a cold, metallic chair in the center of an interrogation chamber. Across from him stood Imperator Zalos. The Vraxian warlord exuded an aura of authority and cruelty. His tall frame was adorned with ceremonial armor etched with symbols of conquest. His dark, piercing eyes regarded Jacob with calculated disdain. "So," Zalos began, his voice smooth but threatening, "this is the human our forces." Jacob Daniels leaned casually against the bulkhead of his cell, observing the rhythm of his surroundings. The low hum of the Imperial dreadnought reverberated through the walls, accompanied by the occasional heavy clomp of armored boots. Despite his seemingly relaxed posture, his mind worked relentlessly, cataloging every detail: guard rotations, surveillance patterns, and weak points in the ship's structure. To his captors he appeared subdued, but Jacob was never one to waste an opportunity. His cell door hissed open, revealing a new prisoner being shoved inside. The figure stumbled, catching itself on the edge of the bunk. It was a Loxite, with scaled crimson skin and a serpentine tail. The creature hissed angrily, but its eyes carried exhaustion and bitterness rather than aggression. "New roommate, huh?" Jacob said, his voice even but edged with curiosity. The Loxite glared at him, the slits of its eyes narrowing. "A human? Great. I'm already in hell." Jacob smirked. "Nice to meet you too. Name's Jacob." "I didn't ask," the Loxite snapped, slumping onto the bunk. "Tarvix. Not that it matters. We're both dead." Jacob leaned forward, his tone growing sharper. "Speak for yourself, Tarvix." "I don't plan on staying here long." Tarvix let out a bitter laugh. "You're delusional. Do you even know where you are? This is the Eviscerator. No one escapes this ship." "Not yet," Jacob muttered, his eyes glinting with determination. "But there's a first time for everything." Later that cycle, Jacob's plan began to take shape. From his cell, he had studied the security systems, the faint flicker in the force field when the guards switched shifts, the predictable lull in activity after a cycle change. He also noticed the way prisoners were herded together in the mess hall, an opportunity to sow the seeds of rebellion. In the mess hall, Jacob and Tarvix joined a group of other captives, a mix of species, all beaten down by the Empire's cruelty. The air was thick with despair, but Jacob saw potential allies. "Listen up," Jacob said, keeping his voice low but firm. If you want to get out of here alive, now's the time to act. Together, we can take them. A gray-skinned Erythian scoffed. You're mad, human. They'll kill us before we take 2 steps. They will if you think like that, Jacob countered. But if we work together, coordinate, we have a chance. They've got numbers, sure, but they don't expect us to fight back. That's our edge. Tarvix tilted his head, his earlier skepticism softening. What's your plan, human? Jacob leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I need a diversion. Something that draws their attention away from the cells. I'll handle the rest. The Erythian raised an eyebrow. And what makes you so sure you can handle it? Jacob gave a wry grin. Let's just say I've been in worse spots than this. The diversion came during the next shift rotation. Tarvix and the Erythian started a loud, chaotic fight in the mess hall, drawing the guards' attention. Shouts and scuffles echoed through the chamber, as guards moved to break up the commotion. Meanwhile, Jacob was already on the move. Using a jagged piece of metal he had pried loose from his bunk, he shorted out the control panel of his cell. Sparks flew as the energy field flickered and collapsed. He slipped into the corridor, moving swiftly and silently toward the main power hub. The corridors were eerily empty, the guards distracted by the riot. Jacob's heart pounded as he approached the power junction. He crouched by the access panel and began working, his fingers moving deftly over the controls. Come on, he muttered under his breath, bypassing the encryption protocols. With a final click, the lights flickered, and the hum of the ship's systems faltered. Alarms blared. Chaos erupted. In the ensuing confusion, Jacob returned to the cell block. Tarvix and the Erythian had been subdued, but the guards were preoccupied with the power failure. Jacob slipped behind one of the guards, disabling him with a precise strike to the neck. He grabbed the guard's weapon and tossed it to Tarvix. Still think I'm mad? Jacob asked, helping the Erythian to his feet. Tarvix gave a toothy grin. You might be, but it's working. The prisoners rallied, their despair replaced with a spark of hope. Armed with weapons scavenged from fallen guards, they began fighting their way toward the escape pods. Jacob took the lead, his combat training evident in every calculated move. The group encountered resistance near the bridge. Imperial soldiers poured into the corridor, their energy rifles blazing. Jacob dove for cover, firing back with ruthless precision. Tarvix, flank left! He shouted. Erythian, cover the rear! The prisoners moved as a unit, their desperation fueling their determination. Jacob's leadership was undeniable, his commands clear and decisive. As the escape pods came into view, hope surged through the group. But standing in their path was Imperator Zalos, flanked by a squad of elite guards. His dark eyes burned with fury. You've caused enough trouble, human, Zalos snarled. Surrender now, and I may spare your miserable life. Jacob stepped forward, unfazed by the Imperator's towering presence. You've got it backward, Zalos. I'm the one giving orders now. Zalos sneered. You think you can challenge the Empire? You're nothing. Jacob raised his weapon, his gaze steady. Maybe. But nothing's got a way of surprising people. The two locked eyes, the tension crackling like static. Finally, Zalos raised his hand, signaling his guards to attack. The battle was fierce, the air thick with smoke and the hiss of energy blasts. Jacob moved like a ghost, his every action purposeful and efficient. The prisoners fought valiantly, their desperation pushing them beyond their limits. In the chaos, Jacob reached the controls for the escape pods. He quickly activated the launch sequence, signaling the others to board. Tarvix, get them out of here! Jacob shouted. What about you? Tarvix demanded. I'll hold them off, Jacob said, his tone brooking no argument. As the escape pods jettisoned into the void, Jacob turned back to face the oncoming guards. His lips curved into a grim smile. Let's see what you've got. The doors sealed behind the last pod, leaving Jacob alone in the fray. His mission wasn't over, not yet. The air smelled of scorched metal and ionized ozone. Smoke billowed in the corridors as alarms wailed across the eviscerator. Jacob Daniels crouched behind a bulkhead, energy rifle cradled against his chest. His escape route was sealed, but his mission wasn't about self-preservation, it was about survival for the millions of humans depending on him. From his earlier reconnaissance, he had noted a secondary access point to the mainframe. The stolen data crystal, the Empire's plans for an Earth invasion, was likely stored on the ship's primary database. Recovering it was his only option. Jacob inhaled deeply, steeling himself. He darted into the hallway, firing controlled bursts at the guards blocking his path. The heavy thud of falling bodies and the hiss of energy discharges punctuated the chaotic symphony. "You're running out of options, human," came Zalos's voice over the ship's comm system, cold and condescending. "Your escape pods are gone. Reinforcements are inbound. Surrender, and perhaps I'll let you keep your head." Jacob smirked to himself, ducking into a service hatch. "You talk too much, Zalos," he muttered under his breath, working quickly to bypass the hatch controls. The faintest flicker of satisfaction crossed his face as the panel slid open. He disappeared into the crawlspace. The maintenance tunnels were cramped and stifling, illuminated by dim emergency lights. Jacob moved swiftly, his breathing steady despite the tension clawing at his chest. His every movement was deliberate. He couldn't afford to make a single sound. In the distance, voices echoed, a patrol searching for him. Jacob paused, pressing himself against the wall, his weapon raised. He waited, muscles coiled like a spring. As two guards passed beneath the grated floor, he dropped silently behind them. With two quick strikes, they crumpled, unconscious before they could react. He slipped their access cards from their belts, muttering, "Thanks for the keys, boys." Reaching the mainframe room was the easy part. Breaching its security was another challenge entirely. The door's locking mechanism required not just the stolen access cards, but an encrypted code. Jacob glanced at his wrist communicator, pulling up the ship's schematics. He keyed in a bypass sequence, gritting his teeth as the lock resisted his every attempt. Come on, he hissed. Finally, with a low hum, the door slid open. Inside, the room was bathed in a cold blue light. Rows of data terminals lined the walls, their screens scrolling with alien text. In the center, the primary interface pulsed like a heartbeat, a holographic projection shimmering above it. Jacob stepped inside, quickly locating the data crystal port. He slid his communicator into place, letting the decryption software do its work. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as the stolen files began downloading. A voice crackled behind him. "Impressive for a human." Jacob spun, raising his weapon, but it was already too late. Zalos stood in the doorway, flanked by his elite guards. The Imperator's expression was a mixture of amusement and contempt. "You've caused me quite a headache, Daniels," Zalos said, stepping into the room. His soldiers fanned out, blocking any chance of escape. "Do you truly believe one man can challenge the might of the Galactic Empire?" Jacob's grip tightened on his rifle. "One man's all it takes, if he's got the right motivation." Zalos chuckled darkly. "Motivation? Foolishness is more like it. You've sealed your fate." Jacob glanced at the progress bar on the terminal, 68%. He needed more time. He slowly lowered his weapon, keeping Zalos engaged. "You know, for all your talk about humans being primitive, you've gone to a lot of trouble to catch me. Almost like you're afraid." Zalos's eyes narrowed. "Afraid? Of you? You overestimate your importance." "Do I?" Jacob took a small step forward, just enough to draw the Imperator's focus. "Then why bother with this little dance? Why not kill me outright? Or is there a part of you that wonders, just maybe, you've underestimated us?" The Imperator's lips curled into a sneer. "Arrogance will be your undoing." Jacob's gaze flicked to the terminal. 92%. He smiled. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing." With a sudden, fluid motion, Jacob threw a small explosive charge at the guards. The device detonated in a blinding flash, throwing the soldiers off balance. Jacob dove for cover, grabbing a fallen weapon as he rolled. Energy blasts lit up the room as chaos erupted. Jacob moved with practiced precision, every shot deliberate and effective. The elite guards, though well trained, weren't prepared for his unrelenting assault. One by one they fell, leaving only Zalos standing. The Imperator snarled, drawing an ornate energy blade. "You'll pay for that, human!" Jacob raised his weapon, but Zalos was already upon him. The blade slashed through the air, forcing Jacob to dodge. The two clashed in a flurry of movement, the room filled with the sound of metal striking metal and the hiss of discharged energy. Despite Zalos' strength, Jacob fought with the agility and tenacity of a predator. He deflected a strike, using the momentum to land a solid punch to the Imperator's jaw. Zalos staggered but recovered quickly, his fury intensifying. "You think you can defeat me?" Zalos roared. "You're nothing!" "Maybe," Jacob replied, his voice steady despite the strain. "But nothing's got a way of surprising people." He feinted to the left, drawing Zalos into an overextended strike. Seizing the opportunity, Jacob swept the Imperator's legs out from under him, sending the alien crashing to the floor. The terminal beeped. The download was complete. Jacob grabbed the communicator and bolted for the door. Behind him, Zalos roared in rage, struggling to rise. "You can't run forever, Daniels!" Zalos shouted after him. Jacob didn't look back. "I don't need forever. Just enough time to win." The corridors were in chaos as Jacob made his way to the hangar. The earlier sabotage had destabilized the ship's systems, and the remaining guards were scrambling to restore order. In the hangar, a sleek Imperial shuttle waited, its engines idling. Jacob sprinted toward it, dodging stray blasts as the remaining guards tried to stop him. He leaped into the cockpit, quickly overriding the controls. As the shuttle lifted off, Jacob glanced back at the eviscerator. The dreadnought loomed ominously, its exterior flickering with signs of internal damage. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before turning his focus to the stars ahead. The stolen data crystal pulsed faintly in his pocket. Humanity now had a chance, a slim one, but a chance nonetheless. Jacob's lips curved into a grim smile. "Round 1's over, Zalos. Let's see how you handle round 2. With that, he activated the shuttle's hyperdrive, vanishing into the void. The fight was far from over, but Jacob Daniels had proven one thing: even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity wouldn't go down without a fight.